You are looking at a stadium that cost $15 billion and was built to be torn down, not abandoned, not forgotten, deliberately, completely dismantled. This is Stadium 974 in Doha, Qatar, and it does not exist anymore. Here is what makes this insane. 40,000 fans once packed this arena. The noise was deafening. The matches, unforgettable. Then the final whistle blew, and the countdown to demolition began. But the real story isn't the demolition. It's what this structure actually was. But first, what forced Qatar to build this way? Qatar sits on a peninsula in the Persian Gulf. Summer temperatures hit 50 degrees Celsius. The country's entire landmass, 11,000 square kilometers, smaller than the state of Connecticut. When FIFA awarded Qatar the 2022 World Cup in 2010, the problems were immediate. Qatar had no existing stadium infrastructure, none capable of hosting elite international football. 8 venues needed to be built. From nothing. The deadline, November 2022. That left 12 years for a construction program of extraordinary scale. But land was scarce, and the Qatari government had one strict condition: no permanent waste. Every stadium had to leave a usable legacy. For 7 of the 8 venues, the answer was clear: expand hospitals, convert to community facilities, reduce seating. But the 8th site, a waterfront plot in Ras Abu Aboud, presented a different challenge. The government wanted the land back, all of it, completely clear. So engineers were given a brief no one had answered before: build a 40,000-seat World Cup venue that fully disappears. Here's where it gets impossible. The answer came from a shipping container. Actually, 974 of them. That number is not random. 974 is Qatar's international dialing code. The concept came from Spanish firm Fenwick Iribarren Architects, working alongside local firm Populous. Their proposal: construct the entire stadium from modular, prefabricated steel components. No concrete superstructure, no permanent poured foundations. Every single element bolted together. Every single element unbolted when finished. The design was approved in 2017. Ground preparation began that same year. Here's what the site actually required. Ras Abu Aboud is reclaimed land, reclaimed from the Gulf itself decades earlier. The ground beneath, compacted fill over dredged seabed, not ideal for a major sports facility. Geotechnical surveys revealed the top layer was unstable. Standard pile foundations would need to go deeper than usual. Engineers drove steel H-piles into the ground. Not concrete, steel, because steel piles can be extracted. Over 1,200 individual piles were installed, depths reaching 18 meters below grade. Every pile was designed with future removal in mind. That decision added 8% to foundation costs. But it meant the site could genuinely be returned, not almost returned, fully returned. And that was just the beginning. The structural frame above ground was the real engineering challenge. 40,000 seats need enormous spans. A conventional concrete stadium at this scale requires months of formwork and curing. Stadium 974 had neither the time nor the mandate for that. The solution: a primary steel diagrid exoskeleton. Think of it as a giant 3-dimensional steel grid, wrapping the entire bowl in an interlocking lattice. The diagrid carries all lateral loads: wind, seismic, crowd movement. It transfers forces down to the bolted base connections. Every connection point in the frame, a flange bolted joint. No welds on site. Every weld done in the factory. This was not accidental. Welds are permanent. Bolts are not. Structural steel was fabricated in factories across Europe and Asia. Each piece shipped to Doha, then assembled like a giant kit. Watch what happens next. Because someone still had to place 974 shipping containers inside a structural diagrid. The containers serve multiple functions simultaneously: box seats, media rooms, concession units, plant rooms, toilets. Each standard ISO container, 12 meters long, 2.4 wide. Combined, they form the inner skin of the stadium bowl. Containers were modified before shipping. Openings cut, electrical pre-wired, plumbing pre-run. When they arrived on site, they weren't just stacked, they were suspended, hung within the diagrid frame. 80-ton cranes positioned each container into its designated slot. Tolerances were measured in millimeters. The entire visible outer facade of Stadium 974, those stacked colored containers, is structural and functional, not decoration, actual working building components. Here's the crazy part. The climate control system was designed to be modular too. Qatar's heat made this non-negotiable. Outdoor cooling at a 40,000-seat venue requires industrial-scale refrigeration infrastructure. Stadium 974 used a district cooling connection, piped chilled water from a nearby central plant. The pipes were above ground within the steel frame, all removable. Air handling units sat within modified containers on the upper deck. Each unit, individually disconnectable, the cooling system could be partially disassembled while the stadium was still in use between match days. Engineers tested each module independently. If one failed, it could be swapped without shutting the venue. During the group stage alone, Stadium 974 hosted 6 matches. Air temperature inside the bowl held consistently at 18 degrees Celsius. Outside, 42 degrees. Inside, 18. But what happened during construction that nobody planned for? In late 2019, a section of the eastern upper tier showed unexpected movement during a load test. Not catastrophic, but outside acceptable tolerances. Engineers traced the issue to differential settlement in the reclaimed ground beneath the eastern piles. The fill material had compressed unevenly. 3 piles had moved 4 millimeters more than adjacent ones. 4 millimeters doesn't sound like much, but in a bolted modular structure, it cascades. The entire eastern section was unloaded, containers removed, steel frame temporarily relieved of load. Additional micropiles, 112 of them, were installed around the affected zone. Each micropile, 200 millimeters in diameter, drilled to 22 meters depth. The work took 11 weeks. The project schedule absorbed it, barely. What happened next? No engineer had ever seen before. Because while the eastern remediation was underway, the western side kept building. 2 separate construction programs running simultaneously, one building forward, one fixing what was built. Over 3,000 workers on site at peak, 18 nationalities represented in the workforce. The Western Grandstand topped out in March 2021. The Eastern catch-up was completed 6 weeks later. By July 2021, structural steelwork complete across the entire bowl. 350 kilometers of steel used in total. That figure deserves a pause. 350 kilometers of structural steel. Then the fit-out phase began. Seats, 40,000 of them arrived in shipping containers. Red, white, maroon, Qatar's national colors. Every seat bolted to a steel terrace tray. Every tray bolted to the diagrid frame. The pitch was installed in August 2022. Hybrid grass, natural with synthetic reinforcement fibers. The surface was grown off-site, then laid in rolls. The entire playing surface installed in 19 days. Stadium 974 was certified match-ready by September 2022. FIFA inspectors signed off 2 months before the tournament. Here's where it gets impossible. Again, because the first match at Stadium 974 revealed something unexpected. The atmosphere was unlike any other Qatar venue. The stadium sits directly on the Doha waterfront. The open-air ends, no roof, allowed sea breeze through the bowl. That cross-ventilation reduced cooling load significantly. Engineers recorded a 15% energy saving against projections. The container facade, those corrugated metal walls, reflected afternoon sun away from the seating bowl. The geometry had been modeled, but the actual effect exceeded models. Peak reflected heat load was 30% lower than calculated, which meant the cooling system ran at reduced capacity, which meant quieter mechanical noise, which meant better acoustics. A modular temporary stadium accidentally produced better environmental performance than several permanent venues. And that was just the match experience. Stadium 974 hosted 7 matches in total, 6 group stage games, 1 round of 16, attendance across all 7, 260,000 people. 0 structural incidents reported. The Netherlands beat the USA here, 3-1. Brazil's Richarlison scored twice. Against Serbia, the last match, December 5, 2022. South Korea versus Brazil. Brazil won 4-1. Then the stadium went silent. And then something extraordinary happened. Deconstruction began in January 2023. Within weeks of the final match, this was not demolition. Demolition is destruction. This was surgery. A dedicated deconstruction contractor, Techcrete, was brought in to reverse the construction sequence precisely. Seats removed first. all 40,000, crated and shipped to stadium projects in developing nations. The containers came down next, each one cataloged with its original reference number. The Fenwick Iribarren design specified that every container retain its stadium fit-out for potential reuse elsewhere. Some containers, pre-wired, pre-plumbed concession units, were shipped directly to stadium projects in Africa and South America. Others entered Maersk's standard shipping container leasing pool, fitted-out sports containers, leased to event organizers worldwide. The steel diagrid came down last, each bolted joint reversed in the exact opposite sequence of installation. Primary steel sections were transported to a holding yard in Mesaid, 18 kilometers south of Doha. Qatar's infrastructure ministry retained the steel for use in future public projects. By December 2023, 12 months after the last match, the stadium was completely gone. The site in Ras Abu Aboud cleared, the piles extracted, the ground reinstated. A waterfront park and mixed-use development is currently under construction on the former stadium footprint. What they built in that spot matters, because the legacy of Stadium 974 is not the building. It never was. The legacy is the methodology. Fully modular, fully reversible, fully relocatable. FIFA has since included reversibility clauses in its updated hosting agreements for 2030 and 2034. The Saudi Arabian 2034 bid, currently approved, references the Stadium 974 model directly in its venue plans. At least 3 proposed venues use containerized modular systems derived from the Ras Abu Aboud design. Engineers at Arup, Bureau Happold, and WSP have each published technical papers on modular stadium construction. All 3 cite Stadium 974 as the proof of concept, a single project shifting an entire industry's assumptions. The total project cost, including construction, operation, and deconstruction, came in at $960 million, not $15 billion. That figure was the entire Qatar World Cup infrastructure program. For this specific stadium, under $1 billion. For a 40,000-seat fully temporary venue, that is extraordinary. By comparison, the permanent Lusail Stadium, which hosted the World Cup final, cost $1.4 billion. Stadium 974 cost 30% less, was fully removed, left no maintenance liability, and its components are actively working in other countries right now. The next impossible build is already starting. Subscribe to Built Impossible.